Hi, and welcome back to Military Law Talks. So today I wanted to do a short video to update the lawsuit regarding the transgender ban in the military. And so if you haven't watched my previous video, I recommend you do so. I'm going to link it below. But if you haven't watched it, I'll give a brief update so this video makes a little bit more sense. Okay, so if you think back, under the Obama administration, prior to the Obama administration, transgender troops were not allowed to serve openly in the military. Now that changed towards the end of the Obama administration and right at the beginning of the Trump administration. And so then Trump 1.0 administration reversed that. So transgender troops were allowed to serve first under Obama, a little bit of the beginning of the Trump administration, and then that was reversed. And then Biden came in and reversed the reversal of Trump. So essentially reinstating Obama's policy. And that has been policy for the last about 3 years. And then very soon after Trump took office, he issued an executive order basically banning DEI, use of, requiring people to announce their pronouns, and also saying that biological sex is what you're born with. It's inherent. It doesn't change. So taking away the use of the word gender in policies and in public-facing websites involving the military, and saying biological sex is just male and female, and that's it. And so with that came essentially a ban of service members with gender dysphoria. And the executive order was issued, and then within a day of the executive order being issued, there was a lawsuit that was filed. And so there's a couple pending lawsuits, but the one I'm going to focus on, it was the one that was filed the day after that executive order was issued. And then after Pete Hegseth came on as SecDef, within 30 days of him taking on that role, he issued another policy memo that essentially banned service members with gender dysphoria, allowing those service members, if they voluntarily leave the service, they can get up to 2 years, not 2 years, but 2 times the amount of involuntary separation pay that they would normally be entitled to, which is very generous. I've never heard of that happening before. And then if they do not choose to voluntarily separate, they could be involuntarily separated. So that brings us to this lawsuit. So on Tuesday, March 18th, the judge, it's a DC Circuit Court judge in this case, and as I explained in the other video, I believe to be pretty biased against the Trump administration, just based on her order. Her bias was very evident. She issued a preliminary injunction, essentially stopping any transgender or anyone gender dysphoria from being separated from the military. However, she stayed that injunction until Friday, March 21st at 10 a.m. to allow the Trump administration to file an appeal. And so that brings us to today, Friday, March 21st, the day of filming. And so there was a lot of activity on this case today. So I'm going to explain what happened today in this video. So first, I'm going to share my screen and show you what let's see, find it. Okay, so the Trump administration, instead of filing an appeal, they actually filed essentially kind of like a request for reconsideration almost, but it's a motion to dissolve that preliminary injunction or and extend the stay pending either this motion to dissolve or alternatively a motion for a stay pending appeal. So they are planning on appealing, but it just hasn't been filed yet. And so it's back in that same district court of DC, right, with the same judge. And so this was filed early this morning on Friday, March 21st. All right. And so just kind of explaining what it is, but the this is arguing that the injunction, I'm reading from the motion, it says the injunction is premised on the court's view that, quote, the Hegseth memo or policy bans all transgendered troops, end quote, from military service. And that's essentially what the court determined, that even though in the written documents it continued to discuss gender dysphoria and a diagnosis of gender dysphoria, the court kind of didn't really consider that and talked about how Pete Hegseth made public comments about banning transgender service members. And so the judge gave a lot of credence to those public statements. And as I explained in my other video, I think that the Trump administration really needs to be more disciplined on messaging, because it's kind of undercutting arguments made in court. And so this is one of them. And so being more disciplined about what the policy actually is. And so they argue that this DoD policy says, and here's a quote from the policy: service members who have a current diagnosis or history of or exhibit symptoms consistent with gender dysphoria are disqualified from military service. And as I explained in the earlier video, this is what it was premised on before. This was exactly what was done in the Trump 1.0 administration, and previous to that under all other administrations prior to the end of the Obama administration, that essentially that gender dysphoria is a mental health diagnosis. It's in the DSM-5, and that is service disqualifying, just like other mental illnesses, schizophrenia, etc., or there's like physical ailments as well that are service disqualifying: flat feet, having Crohn's disease, different medical conditions that disqualify you from service. I myself, I have poor vision and a scar on one of my eyes, and that was initially disqualifying, but I got a medical waiver to come into the military. So that's very common that there's medical conditions that are disqualifying from military service. And so the continuing with this motion, they are arguing, so it's defendants, that's the DOJ representing the government, the Trump administration, had explained, however, that the DOD policy prescriptively barring individuals from serving in the military turns on gender dysphoria, a medical condition, and does not discriminate against trans identifying persons as a class. And like I explained in the earlier video, is that the judge really framed this issue as a civil rights issue, that there was like a personal animus against transgendered individuals, and that this policy was a way to discriminate and target transgender individuals. And I said in that earlier video that a better argument would be that they need to focus on that this is a medical condition and it's a disqualifying medical condition, and make it purely on that alone. And I know the Trump administration is not watching my videos, but it's good that they finally are clarifying this argument and going with this. It's a lot stronger of an argument than maybe, or at least it seems like, was made at the preliminary hearing motion hearing earlier this week. And so really just focusing on this is a disqualifying medical condition, that is really their best argument. And so they apparently, at the previous oral argument hearing, they told the court that there was further guidance pending and it was expected March 26th. That's next week. But that guidance was issued today, March 21st. And we'll go over that after we finish with this motion. It's pretty short, but they issued that guidance. And so essentially this motion is saying, hey, things have changed. There's new guidance. And so based on that, we want you to extend this stay. And so the pertinent part of that new guidance confirms that, quote, The phrase exhibit symptoms consistent with gender dysphoria refers to the diagnostic criteria outlined in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. That's the DSM. It's currently 5th edition, so DSM 5, and applies only to individuals who exhibit such symptoms that would be sufficient to constitute a diagnosis, i.e., a marked incongruence and clinically significant distress or impairment for at least 6 months. And so it goes on to say that because this new guidance confirms that the court misconstrued the scope of the policy, defendants hereby respectfully move to dissolve the March 18th preliminary injunction. And so they argue that this is a significant change. That's a quote because the earlier order from the judge said if there's some sort of, quote, significant change, then she would reassess this preliminary injunction. And so the Biden or the Trump administration is arguing that the court was too broad um, in its order, that it would encompass all trans identifying service members or applicants, right? People who are wanting to join the military, and that this new guidance is saying that we're really just concerned with military readiness, deployability, and costs associated with a medical condition. That this is a medical condition, and it emphasized and it pointed out that every prior administration, to some degree, kept out of the military until the Biden administration. And so, for these reasons, they asked for the stay to either be extended or dissolved. They do say that they are going to appeal. So it says the acting solicitor general has authorized the appeal of this court's preliminary injunction. And so they plan on appealing it. And so that was submitted earlier today, March 21st. And then let me just show you real quick the guidance. So this is the new guidance that was issued today. And it does say it's not going to be implemented due to the preliminary injunction issued in this case, the case that I'm discussing. And then if it's modified or lifted, then it'll be updated. But essentially, it's saying that service members who have a current diagnosis or history of or exhibit symptoms consistent with gender dysphoria are no longer eligible for military service and will be processed for separation. It talks about similar, right? This is normal that we have medical standards, high standards for medical readiness. And if you don't meet those standards, then you can no longer serve. So it talks about like a records review, reviewing all the medical records to see who's been diagnosed. Also, it talks about during the next 6 months, all service members going through a PHA, that's a periodic health assessment, that they will have an added question, and that added question will be if they have a current diagnosis, history of, or exhibit symptoms consistent with gender dysphoria. And if they do, then they will be categorized as non-deployable, and they will either be separated or they'll be put in the disability evaluation system, which is a medical evaluation board, med board, as colloquially understood. And so then they could be processed out that way. And so, or if they're not, if they're not eligible for a med board, i.e., they have to have some other qualifying condition or comorbidity per this policy, then they'll be involuntarily separated. However, this policy says it does supersede any conflicting policy guidance. And so I would interpret that to mean that voluntarily separation, getting 2 times the separation pay, would be superseded. So potentially they wouldn't have the opportunity to, anyone with gender dysphoria wouldn't have the opportunity to take advantage of that and voluntarily separate. It looks like that is superseding. All right. And who knows, maybe that'll change. Maybe further guidance will come out that will change that. So the court orders the defendants to post any guidance, and it reinstates the stay, orders the opposition motion. And so it says that, so it's currently stayed, and that is the current status of that. So the preliminary injunction that was issued is currently stayed, which means there's nothing stopping the Trump administration from taking any action against members with gender dysphoria. However, the judge said that if anything negative happens to those soldiers, service members, they could themselves file a temporary restraining order or join a lawsuit to ask this lawsuit or another lawsuit to ask for a temporary restraining order. So in a sense, the temporary restraining order is in effect, even though technically it stayed. But I would be shocked if there's any action between now and, appealing, etc. So things usually don't move super quick in the military anyways. So, all right. That is all I have on that updates. I'm going to be following this case, and I'll be posting more videos about this case. If you like this video, please make sure you hit the like button, share this video out there. I'm a new channel, so I'd really appreciate you subscribing and sharing this content with anyone else you think would enjoy it. And I'll see you in the next video. Thank you.